They are born for battle. They live for battle. They die in battle. But what happens when the Orks actually win? To the galaxy. It is a nightmare. To the Orks, it is the greatest victory of all. Another chance to fight again. This is what happens when the Orks win the war. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a terrifying what-if scenario from the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. What if the Orks, the endless green tide, actually achieved their ultimate goal and conquered everything? It's a thought that sends shivers down the spine of every Imperial citizen, Eldar Farseer, and even Chaos Lord. First, let's understand the Ork psyche. Orks don't fight for territory in the way humans do. They don't fight for resources, or ideology, or even for the glory of their gods, Gork and Mork. They fight because fighting is what they are asterisk. It's their biological imperative, their culture, their religion, and their favorite pastime, all rolled into one glorious, violent package. An Ork at peace is an Ork that's about to die of boredom. So, imagine a galaxy where the last bastion of humanity has fallen. The final craft world is a burning husk. The Necrons have been smashed back into their tombs, and the Tyranid hive fleets have been devoured. The Orks stand victorious over a silent galaxy. What happens next? Utter, glorious chaos. The immediate aftermath would be a party of galactic proportions. The biggest, loudest, most destructive celebration you can imagine. Every planet would become a festival of scrap metal fireworks, deafening war cries, and a whole lot of headbutting. Warbosses, now galactic overlords, would sit atop mountains of wreckage, their egos swelling to match their physical size. This is Nature of Ork WAAAGH, the moment every Ork dreams of. But this victory party can't last forever. Remember, an Ork needs a fight. With no external enemies left, who do they turn on? Each other? Of course. The galaxy-spanning Ork Empire, or Orkverse, would shatter almost instantly. The massive WAAAGH that conquered the galaxy would splinter into countless smaller empires, each ruled by the strongest warboss in that sector. This is where things get really interesting, and, frankly, very Ork-like. The entire galaxy would transform into a colossal, never-ending gladiatorial arena. Planets wouldn't be colonized. They'd be converted into battlegrounds. Moons would be turned into demolition derby tracks for gargantuan battle wagons. Star systems would become the personal fiefdoms of unimaginably powerful Warbosses, who would constantly wage war on their neighbors just for the sheer fun of it. Think of it. An entire galaxy of Mad Max-style warlords, each trying to outdo the other in a perpetual arms race. The mech boys would be in heaven, their creativity unleashed. They'd build bigger and bigger gargants, some the size of small moons. They'd invent even more ridiculous and deadly weapons, powered by nothing more than the collective belief of the Orks around them. The Daka would reach levels previously thought impossible. The strongest warboss would eventually emerge from this galactic free-for-all, a true emperor of the Orks, a being of immense physical power and cunning, perhaps on the level of the legendary beast from the War of the Beast. This supreme warboss would command the loyalty of trillions of Orks, not through diplomacy, but through sheer intimidation and the promise of the biggest fight of all. And what would that be? A WAAAGH, to end old WAAAGHs, aimed at, well, whatever's left. Maybe they'd try to punch a hole into another reality, or wage war on a star, just to see if they could. For the Orks, this isn't a dystopia. It's utopia. A galaxy where the only law is the law of the strongest, where every day brings a new battle, and where the promise of a good scrap is always just around the corner. They would have accidentally created their own paradise, an eternal, self-sustaining cycle of conflict. The galaxy wouldn't be destroyed in a traditional sense. It would be endlessly recycled into battlefields, scrap heaps, and monuments to Gork and Mork. A terrifying thought for everyone else, but for the Orks, it's just Tuesday. So, what do you think? Is an Ork-dominated galaxy the ultimate end for the 40K universe, or just another chapter in its endless war? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into Greenskin Victory, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more lore. We'll see you in the next one. What drives a soldier to fight? For some, it's a noble cause, a deeply held belief. For others, it's the promise of wealth, land, or power. They fight for conquest, for ideology, for a better tomorrow. But out there, in the grim darkness of the far future, there's a race that spits on all of that. A race that fights for one reason and one reason only. Because they absolutely love it. Today, we're diving into the glorious, chaotic, and utterly insane world of the Orks. Forget everything you think you know about warfare. The Orks aren't building an empire. They're not trying to spread a political system or a religion. They're on a permanent, galaxy-spanning pub brawl, and everyone's invited, whether they like it or not. For an Ork, the ultimate reward for a good fight is another, even bigger fight. Victory isn't the end of the war. It's the start of the after-party, and the party is just more war. This is the core of the Ork psyche, the very engine that drives their society. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of beautiful, brutal simplicity. When an Ork warband wins a battle, they don't settle down. They don't draw up new borders or start collecting taxes. No, they get bigger. They get louder. They get more. ... Orky, the psychic energy of their collective excitement, their WAAAGH, grows stronger. This energy literally warps reality around them. It makes their ramshackle junk-built technology work when it should fall apart. It makes their guns shoot louder, their trucks go faster, and their choppers hit harder. So, what happens when an Ork WAAAGH actually conquers something? Imagine a gleaming, imperial hive city, a spire of Gothic architecture and rigid order, finally falling to a green tide. An imperial general might see it as a strategic asset. An elder farseer might see it as a nexus of lost history. An Ork, Warbosses, he sees the universe's greatest wrestling ring. Instead of occupying the city, the Orks repurpose it. The grand cathedrals become stomping grounds for giant warsquigs. The hablocks are torn down and welded into towering, rust-covered effigies of their gods, Gork and Mork. The planetary defense grid is rewired to shoot fireworks that spell out rude words in the sky. The entire city, once a symbol of human achievement, becomes a scrapyard, a brewery, and a gladiatorial arena, all rolled into one. The former citizens, if they're lucky, they're gone. If not, they become Gretchen, the smallest and most bullied caste of Ork society, or worse, target practice. The Orks aren't cruel in a calculated way. They're just utterly indifferent to anything that isn't loud, fast, or killy. They'll turn a pristine manufactorum into a workshop for building deaf dreads and kilocants walking. War machines that are as likely to explode as they are to kill the enemy. And to an Ork, both outcomes are hilarious. The city is no longer a city. It is a stage. The great plazas, once filled with merchants and pilgrims, now host endless brawls. Orks fight each other for fun, for status, for the best bit of scrap metal. A disagreement over who gets the last fungus beer can escalate into a full-scale battle, involving armored buggies and dozens of boys. This isn't chaos for the sake of anarchy. It's the Ork way of life. This constant infighting is how they innovate. The strongest mech boy who builds the shootiest gun gets to lead the next project. The toughest knob who wins the most fights gets to boss around the other boys. This is what makes the Orks so terrifyingly unique. They don't want your planet to exploit its resources. They want it because it looks like a good place for a dust-up. Victory, for them, doesn't mean peace. It means escalation. A conquered city becomes the launch pad for an even bigger WAAAGH. The scrap from the fallen metropolis is used to build more Gargan's god machines that are walking parodies of imperial titans. The increased population of Orks generates a stronger WAAAGH field, attracting more Orks from across the sector, like moths to a glorious green flame. Their society is a chaotic feedback loop of violence. They win, they get bigger, they fight more, they fight more, they win more. They are the galaxy's ultimate party crashers, and they will never, ever leave, because they're having way too much fun. They don't seek to rule the ashes. They want to dance in them, fight in Tim, and use them to build something that makes an even bigger explosion. For the Orks, the war never ends, and that's exactly how they like it. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the mind of the Orks. If you enjoyed this look into the glorious madness of Warhammer 40,000, please hit that like button, subscribe for more lore, and ring that bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the grim darkness of the far future. Let me know in the comments which faction you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay safe, and WAAAGH. Ever wondered what happens when an unstoppable force meets? So, how does an Ork army even begin? It's simpler and messier than you might think. Orks are, for all intents and purposes, a type of fungus. Every single Ork, from the smallest grut to the mightiest warboss, constantly sheds microscopic spores. These spores are incredibly resilient, able to survive in the vacuum of space, withstand extreme temperatures, and lie dormant for centuries. When they land on a suitable planet, they begin to grow, burrowing deep into the soil and creating a whole new orkoid ecosystem. First come the fungi, then the squigs bizarre creatures that serve as food, tools, and sometimes even hair. Then the Gretchen, or grots, sprout up, serving as the bottom rung of Ork society. Finally, the Orks themselves emerge, born with an innate knowledge of their culture and a burning desire for a good scrap. This means that wherever Orks fight, they're literally sowing the seeds of their next invasion. Every battlefield where an Ork falls becomes a potential new breeding ground. It's a terrifying form of exponential growth. A small Ork raiding party can turn into a planetary infestation. A planetary infestation can become a full-blown WAAAGH. A psychic crusade of pure violence that can sweep across entire star systems. The more victories they achieve, the more spores they spread, and the larger their population becomes. It's a feedback loop of conquest. More fighting means more Orks, and more Orks means more fighting. Now, let's talk about their tech. Ork technology, or tech, is a testament to the power of pure, unadulterated belief. It's ramshackle, jury-rig, and often looks like it was cobbled together from a junkyard. And that's because it was. Orks are natural scavengers and mechanics, known as mech boys. They have an instinctual understanding of engineering, a genetic memory that allows them to build devastating weapons and rickety vehicles. But here's the twist. Their technology works because they believe it will. This is thanks to a latent psychic field generated by large groups of Orks. They believe a pile of scrap metal with a big red button will fire a giant laser. So it does. They believe painting a vehicle red makes it go faster. And in the world of 40,000, it genuinely does. This power of positive thinking means their technology scales with their success. As a WAAAGH grows, the collective psychic field intensifies. A mech boy who could only build a clunky shooter for a small warband might suddenly find himself capable of constructing a garganta walking war machine the size of a skyscraper, bristling with impossible weaponry. The more they win, the more scrap they salvage from their defeated enemies, and the more ambitious their creations become. They can reverse engineer and orkify technology from any other race, whether it's an Imperial tank or an Eldar starship. The bigger the WAAAGH, the stronger the psychic field, the more powerful and ludicrous their tech becomes. On paper, this should make them an unstoppable tide, destined to drown the galaxy in a green wave of violence and shoddy engineering. But it doesn't. And that brings us to the Great Ork Paradox. The very thing that makes the Orks so dangerous is also their greatest weakness. Their nature. Ork society is built on a simple principle. Might makes right. The biggest, strongest, and most cunning Ork leads the tribe. This leader is the warboss. To become a warboss, an Ork has to prove his strength by beating every other contender into submission. He maintains his rule by leading his boys to bigger and better fights, securing more loot, and growing ever larger and more powerful himself. Here's where the cycle turns on itself. Imagine a warboss, let's call him Ghazghkull's slightly less famous cousin, Warbosses Gitstampa, has just led his WAAAGH to a glorious victory. They've crushed a planetary defense force, looted an entire hive city, and the boys are ecstatic. The victory high is palpable. Spores are spreading, The mech boys are building bigger and badder war machines, and the weird boys are channeling so much WAAAGH energy, their heads are literally exploding. Gitstempa is at the peak of his power. He's bigger, meaner, and more heavily armed than ever before. He should be ready to lead his now massive army to conquer the next star system. But his nobs' ambitious, powerful lieutenants are looking at him differently now. They've also grown bigger and stronger from all the fighting. They see the magnificent pile of loot, the massive army, and the glory Gitstempa has accumulated. And they think, "Oi, I could do that. I could do that better." That little voice of ambition, that core tenet of Ork society, begins to bubble up. One of his biggest knobs, who just got a shiny new power claw from the recent looting, decides now is the perfect time to make his move. He walks up to Warboss Gitstempa in the middle of the victory celebration and challenges him for leadership. Suddenly, the focus of the WAAAGH shifts. It's no longer about conquering the galaxy. It's about who gets to be the top dog right here, right now. The boys, who live for a good fight, don't care who they're fighting. A challenge to the boss is the best kind of entertainment. The WAAAGH grinds to a halt. The grand strategy is forgotten. The entire Ork horde dissolves into a massive civil war. Clans that were united under Gitstempa a moment ago are now picking sides. Grimguts's loyalists fight Gitstempa's followers. Other knobs see this as their chance and start their own little rebellions. The meticulously gathered momentum of the WAAAGH is instantly squandered on internal conflict. It becomes a free-for-all, a chaotic brawl where the only goal is to prove you're the artist. If Gitstempa wins, he might be able to restore order. But his army will be severely weakened, and he'll have to spend precious time putting down smaller rebellions. If Grimgits wins, he becomes the new war boss, but he inherits a fractured and diminished force. Often, no single victory emerges. The Great WAAAGH shatters into dozens of smaller warbands, each led by a newly self-proclaimed warboss, who then wander off in different directions, looking for their own fights, starting the cycle all over again. This is the great paradox of the Orks. Their biological and cultural imperatives drive them to grow, to conquer, and to become an overwhelming threat. Yet, the very same culture of might makes right and shows that just as they reach their most dangerous potential, they inevitably collapse under the weight of their own ambition. They are their own worst enemy. The galaxy is saved from total Ork domination, not by the heroism of its defenders, but by the simple fact that an Ork you won't resist punching the guy next to him if he thinks he can get away with it. They are a force of nature that contains its own reset button, and for every other living being in the 41st millennium, that's probably a very, very good thing. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this dive into the wonderfully bizarre logic of the Orks, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more lore, and let us know in the comments which 40K faction you want us to cover next. We'll see you in the next one. When the greenskin tide washes over a human world, what happens to the people left behind? The lucky ones die in the initial onslaught. The unlucky ones, they become playthings, fuel, and fodder for the brutal amusement of the Orks. Welcome to the grim reality of life on a conquered imperial planet, a world transformed into a grotesque parody of civilization, a scrapyard hell where survival is a curse. Imagine your city, your home, systematically dismantled. Towering Gothic spires are torn down, not with any strategic purpose, but with the gleeful abandon of a child smashing a sand. The metal, the plasteel, the very bones of your world are hauled away to feed the insatiable forges of the mechboy. These demented greenskin engineers, with more ambition than sense, hammer and weld the remnants of your life into their next custom creation. A gleaming cathedral spire might become the exhaust pipe for a gargan. A beloved public monument is melted down for bolts on a deft tread. Your world is literally consumed, piece by piece, to build the engines of its own destruction. The survivors are herded like grop. The strong are put to work in slave pits. Their days a relentless cycle of hard labor under the crack of a run-third's whip. They toil in mines, quarries, and fungus farms, their bodies breaking to sustain the Ork war machine. There is no rest, no respite, only the guttural commands of their masters and the constant, looming threat of a casual, brutal end. Any sign of weakness, any faltering step is an invitation for a stomping. Life expectancy in these pits is measured in weeks, if not days. But hard labor isn't the only fate. For the Orks, war is not just a means to an end. It is the end itself. It's their culture, their religion, their favorite pastime. And when there are no other enemies to fight, they'll make their own entertainment. Captured soldiers, planetary defense force troopers, even civilians deemed fighty low-keen, are thrown into fighting pits. These are not arenas of honor. They are crude, blood-soaked circles in the dirt where desperate humans are forced to battle each other. Or worse, the Orks' vicious pets. I once spoke to a Acadian veteran, a man whose eyes had seen more horror than any soul should bear. He wasn't haunted by the battles he fought, but by what he was forced to watch. Captured after a failed counterattack, he and his squad were dragged to a makeshift arena. The Orks, roaring with laughter and placing bets with teeth. They'd knocked from his comrades' mouths, released a colossal squigs into the pit. These were no mere beasts. They were mountains of muscle, teeth, and rage. One was a vibrant, toxic green, the other a blotchy, scarred red. He described the sound, a wet, tearing noise as they collided, the ground shaking with their impact. The Orks weren't just watching. They were participating, throwing rocks and scrap at the beasts to agitate them further, their guttural cheers reaching a fever pitch. He remembered the smell of blood and sweat and the ozone-like temps of Ork excitement. For what felt like an eternity, he was forced to witness this primal, pointless violence, a spectator to a drama of pure, unthinking brutality. The green squig eventually tore the red one apart, and the Orks erupted, his reward for surviving the spectacle, being kicked back into a holding pen to await the next day's fun. This is the purpose a human serves under. Ork rule, to be a tool, a toy, or a momentary distraction. There's no grand plan, no new social order. There is only the endless, anarchic, and violent whim of the greenskin. They don't want to rule you. They want to use you up, break you, and laugh as you scream. The transformation of a world is total. The air fills with the greasy smoke of poorly maintained engines. The ground becomes a treacherous landscape of jagged metal and refuse. The only law is the law of the biggest and the meanest, and amidst it all, are the Gretchen. The smaller, sniveling cousins of the Orks. They scurry through the ruins, tormenting human slaves with a cruelty born of their own subjugation. They are the overseers, the informants, the petty tyrants of this new world order, finding a sick pleasure in having something, for once, weaker than themselves, to bully. A stolen crust of bread, a moment's rest, could earn a slave a vicious beating from a dozen vengeful grots. The psychological toll is unimaginable. To see everything you've ever known, every symbol of your culture and society, either smashed to rubble or twisted into a crude Ork parody, is a soul-destroying experience. An Imperial Aquila might be crudely painted on a Trux door, only to be covered in mud and bullet holes. A statue of a revered saint might have a crude helmet welded to its head and be used for target practice. It's not just destruction, it's desecration. It's the ultimate act of contempt. The only glimmer of hope in this living nightmare is the thought of liberation, the dream that one day the angels of death will descend from the heavens, or the endless ranks of the Astra Militarum will make. For the slaves in the pits and the fighters in the arenas, that is the only prayer they have left. They pray for a swift, violent, and final end to the green tide, even if it means being consumed in the fire of reclamation, because any end, even annihilation, is preferable to a life as a plaything for the Orks. The galaxy is filled with horrors, with alien empires that will enslave or consume humanity for their own inscrutable reasons. But the fate of a world under the boot of an Ork is unique in its sheer, pointless, anarchic cruelty. It is a descent into a madhouse where the inmates are in charge, and the only currency is violence and noise. It is a testament to the fact that sometimes the most terrifying monster is the one that is simply having fun. Thank you for joining me on this bleak journey into the heart of WAAAGH. The inverse of the 41st millennium is a dark place, and understanding our enemies is key to appreciating the valor of those who stand against them. If you found this glimpse into the grim darkness enlightening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more lore. Your support helps us continue to explore the darkest corners of this incredible setting. Until next time, stay safe, and may the Emperor protect. Start with a dramatic, slightly foreboding tone. Have you ever heard of a victory that tastes like ash? A triumph that only signals a greater doom to come. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, this isn't just a paradox. It's the terrifying reality of fighting the Orks. And at the heart of this green tide, this galaxy-spanning maelstrom of violence, stands one name. A name whispered in fear in all Ghazghkull Ork Thraka. Ghazghkull isn't just an Ork warlord. He is the prophet of the WAAAGH, a being of pure, brutal cunning, and his story is a saga of unending war. His crusades aren't mere raids. They are planetary-scale conflicts that reshape entire star systems. Imagine a world, your world, suddenly blotted out by a green moon of scrap metal and fury. This is the arrival of Ghazghkull's fleet. The sky burns, the ground shakes, and the air fills with the deafening roar of WAAAGH. The war that follows is total. The Orks don't fight for territory in the way we understand it. They fight for the sheer, unadulterated joy of the scrap. They are a force of nature, a biological hurricane of violence. When they conquer a planet, they don't just occupy it, they transform it. Industrial hives become mechboy workshops, churning out ever more ludicrous war machines. Cathedral spires are hung with jagged trophies, and continents are turned into gargantuan battlegrounds where different Ork clans fight each other just for practice. Think of the infamous Third War for Armageddon. Ghazghkull didn't just attack the planet, he turned it into his personal playground. He orchestrated a conflict so vast, so bloody, that it drew in millions of Imperial Guardsmen, dozens of Space Marine chapters, and even the Grey Knights. He tested his strength against the best the Imperium had to offer, learning from every encounter, every duel, every explosion. He turned a vital industrial world into a monument to Ork warfare, a festering wound in the heart of the Imperium that is never truly healed. But here is the chilling tragedy, the core of the Ork threat. Every Ork victory, every planet they crush under their iron-shod boots, becomes fuel for the next, even bigger war. A WAAAGH is more than just an army. It's a psychic phenomenon. The more Orks gather, the more they fight, the more they win, the more powerful this gestalt energy becomes. This energy makes them tougher, their weapons more effective even, making their ramshackle technology work through sheer belief. A successful WAAAGH doesn't disperse, it snowballs. So, when the Imperium manages to score a victory against the Orks, it's a hollow one. Let's say they repel an invasion, push back the green tide. What happens to the defeated Orks? They scatter, but they don't die out. They form smaller warbands, infesting nearby systems, becoming a chronic plague of piracy and raids. The spores they shed during the conflict bloom into new generations of Orks, on worlds that were thought to be safe. Every dead Ork is a seed for future conflict. The Imperium isn't just fighting an army, it's fighting a self-replicating biological weapon. This is why the Imperium fears an Ork victory almost as much as it fears a defeat. A victory means grows stronger, attracting more Orks from across the galaxy. The warlord at its head becomes a living legend, his psychic presence a beacon for countless more boys to join the fun. A defeated orc army might take years to recover. A victorious one might return in months, twice as large and 10 times as angry. Ghazghkull embodies this terrifying cycle. He has been defeated, even seemingly killed, multiple times. During the Third War for Armageddon, he faced Commissar Yerrick, his legendary arch-nemesis. He's been hunted by the galaxy's greatest assassins and challenged by the mightiest champions. Yet, he always comes back. Each defeat is just a learning experience. Each death is merely an opportunity for a doc to rebuild him, bigger, meaner, and more heavily armed than before. His head was famously pierced by a bolter round, an injury that should have killed him. Instead, a pain boy replaced part of his skull with adamantium, and the resulting visions only strengthened his conviction as the prophet of Gork and Mork. This is the great, cosmic joke that the Orks play on the galaxy. They are the ultimate warriors, for whom the process of war is the entire point. They don't want to build an empire of peace and stability. They want to turn the entire galaxy into one giant, endless brawl. And as long as beings like Ghazghkull Thraka draw breath, that dream, or rather, that nightmare gets closer to reality with every shell fired and every world burned. The tragedy for the Imperium is that there is no winning strategy. Total annihilation is impossible due to the orkoid spore-based reproduction. Containing them is like trying to cup water in your hands. And negotiating is out of the question. You can't reason with a tidal wave. All you can do is build your walls higher, load your guns, and pray that when the green tide comes for you, you can hold on for just one more day. Because the orcs, they'll always be back, and they'll always be stronger. This is the enduring horror, and, let's be honest, the spectacular appeal of the orcs in Warhammer 40,000. They are a force that cannot be truly defeated because, for them, the fight itself is the ultimate victory. The story of Ghazghkull isn't a story of conquest. It's the story of war eternal, a saga written in blood, scrap metal, and the thunderous laughter of brutal gods. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Green Menace. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the endless WAAGH, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more tailies. From the 41st millennium, let me know in the comments which 40K story you'd like to see next. Until then, stay safe, and may the Emperor protect. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the Green Tide, the Endless WAAAGH, the single most resilient and chaotic force in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. We're talking about the Orks. Now, in a galaxy where empires rise and fall, where gods clash and entire species are wiped from existence, there is one fundamental truth about the Orks that sets them apart from everyone else. Yukoi and actually beat them. I know what you're thinking. We've seen Orks get beaten all the time, right? Imperial Guard hold the line. Space Marines purge the Green Tide. Eldar outmaneuver them. But here's a kicker. For an Ork, that's not a defeat. It's just a temporary setback. It's the universe telling them, good scrap, but you need to come back bigger, meaner, and with more DACA. For any other faction, a crushing loss can mean the end of a campaign, the loss of a world, even extinction. For Orks, it's a learning experience. It's an audition for the next, even bigger war. To really get this, you have to understand the Ork psyche. They don't exist for conquest in the way a human general would understand it. They don't fight for resources, or ideology, or even survival in the traditional sense. Orks exist for one thing and one thing only. The fight itself. The crash of choppas. The roar of a battle wagon. The thunderous boom of a shock attack. Goon, that's not the means to an end for them. That asterisk is asterisk the end. It's their purpose, their religion, and their greatest joy all rolled into one. So, when an Ork warband gets smashed by a Space Marine chapter, the survivors don't retreat in shame. They get excited. They've just found some really tough opponents. This means the next fight is going to be even better. Think about it from a biological and ecological perspective. Orks are, in essence, a sentient fungus. They reproduce via spores, which they release constantly, but especially upon death. So, You win a massive battle against an orc horde, wiping out millions of them. You've just seeded that entire planet with orcoid spores. Unless you are prepared to burn every square inch of the world down to the bedrock, you haven't won. You've just planted the seeds for the next, even bigger invasion. These spores will lie dormant, seeping into the ecosystem, eventually growing into new orcs. First, you get Squigs, then Gretchen, and finally, the orcs themselves. The planet is now a ticking time bomb, destined to become a feral orc world. Your victory just guaranteed a future war. This cycle is the core of their success. If an orc horde wins, it's great. They get to loot, enslave the local population for work, and use the new resources to build bigger, louder, and more explosive war machines. This attracts more orcs from surrounding systems, swelling their numbers until the WAAAGH becomes an unstoppable force. A galactic-level threat that just keeps rolling from one system to the next. A party that never ends. The war continues. It just gets bigger. But what if they lose? Well, as we said, the spores ensure a comeback. But more than that, the survivors get tougher. Orcs literally grow bigger and stronger the more they fight. A boy who survives a few scraps becomes a knob. A knob who leads a few successful raids becomes a Warbosses had his head kicked in by a chapter master and lived to tell the tale. He comes back with a metal jaw, a bigger power claw, and a burning desire for a rematch. He's learned from the defeat. He knows he needs more boys, better Lotus, and maybe a stomper or two. The loss only fuels his ambition and makes him a more dangerous leader. Let's paint a picture. Imagine a sprawling hive city, its spires scraping the polluted clouds. For generations, it has stood as a bastion of imperial might. Then, the green tide comes, a WAAAGH of unimaginable scale, led by a colossal war boss, crashes against its walls. The fighting is brutal, lasting for months. The Astra Militarum fights to the last man. The PDF is annihilated, and even the local Astartes defenders are overwhelmed. The city falls. For the Imperium, it's a catastrophic loss. A vital industrial world is gone. Billions of lives are extinguished, and a strategic anchor in the sector has vanished. It's a tragedy that will be mourned for centuries. For the Orks, it's the after-party. The war boss stands atop the highest spire, looking down at the burning ruins and the endless sea of his boys celebrating. He lets out a booming laugh that echoes across the shattered metropolis. One of his knobs comes up to him and says, "Boss, we did it. We won." The war boss turns, a manic grin splitting his face, and bellows for all to hear. "One. W-O. T's dat. Dis ain't. Da. And it's. Da. Start of da. Next fight." And he's right. For them, this victory isn't a conclusion. It's a new beginning. They'll strip the city for every last scrap of metal, turning priceless architecture into rickety death dreads and beautiful statuary into ammunition. The entire planet becomes a new recruitment ground and a launch pad. The WAAAGH doesn't dissipate. It refuels. It gets bigger. The orcs that were once a planetary threat are now a subsector threat, then a sector threat. The victory just feeds the eternal cycle of violence. This is the horrifying genius of the orcs. They are a self-perpetuating, self-improving engine of war. They thrive on conflict. Winning makes them stronger, and losing makes them smarter and more determined, while also planting the seeds for their return. They are the galaxy's ultimate feedback loop of violence. While the Imperium is stretched thin, the Eldar are a dying race, and the forces of chaos are busy with their own great game. The orcs are just having a good time. They are the only faction that is truly, unequivocally winning at the game of war, because for them, the game itself is the prize. You can't defeat an enemy whose only goal is to fight forever. Every battle, win or lose, just proves them right. And that's why, no matter what happens in the 41st millennium, you can be sure of one thing. There will always be a WAAAGH. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. It's a terrifying concept, isn't it? The idea of an enemy that can't really be defeated. What are your favorite examples of orc logic or their strange resilience? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more lore. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Until next time, stay safe and keep fighting the long war. Upbeat, slightly aggressive rock music begins, then fades to a background hum. Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving headfirst into the green tide, the roaring, rampaging, unstoppable force of nature that is the Ork WAAAGH. Forget tactics, forget strategy, forget sanity. We're talking about a phenomenon so powerful it bends the very fabric of reality to its will. So, what exactly is a WAAAGH? On the surface, it's a crusade, a holy war, and a planetary scale pub brawl, all rolled into one. It's the single most important event in an Ork's life, but it's so much more than just a simple invasion. It's a psychic event. A self-perpetuating hurricane of violence and conquest that starts with a single powerful Ork and can end with the utter consumption of entire star systems. It all begins with a spark. An Ork, bigger, meaner, and hoost planarda than the rest, rises to become a war boss. This isn't a democratic process. It's a brutal climb to the top, paved with the skulls of his rivals. As this war boss grows in power and influence, he starts to generate a psychic field. This isn't some subtle, manipulative energy. It's a raw, crude, and incredibly potent force that resonates with every Ork around him. They call this feeling the WAAAGH. It's an itch they can't scratch, a primal urge to fight, to conquer, to build bigger, louder, and more explosive. The Warboss's psychic presence acts like a magnet. More and more Orks flock to his banner, their own latent psychic energies adding to the growing storm. This collective belief system is what makes the Orks so terrifyingly effective. You see, Orks believe that red things go faster, and because enough of them believe it, their ramshackle, barely held together trucks, painted a hasty shade of crimson, genuinely will outpace a technologically superior vehicle. They believe their shooters, which are little more than lumps of metal that spray bullets in a general direction, will work. And so they do. The WAAAGH energy literally wills their crude technology into function. As the warboss gathers his boys, the WAAAGH grows from a local skirmish into a full-blown planetary invasion. The Ork ecosystem kicks into high gear. Mech boys, the Ork engineers, are suddenly inspired, creating gargantuan war machines like Stompas and Gargants walk-in idols of the Ork gods. Gork and Mork, bristling with enough firepower to level cities. Pain boys, the doctors of Ork society, get to work patching up the boys with whatever bits of scrap they can find. And the weird boys, Ork psychers, become living conduits for the raw WAAAGH energy, channeling it into devastating psychic blasts or teleporting entire mobs of boys directly into the enemy's front lines. Once a planet is conquered, the WAAAGH doesn't stop. It mutates. The spores that every Ork constantly sheds begin to germinate, creating a new generation of Orks and infesting the world. The planet is transformed into a staging ground, a massive factory dedicated to producing more weapons, more abakeless, and more Orks. Now a mighty warlord gazes up at the stars, and the WAAAGH whispers a new, tantalizing promise. More worlds to conquer. This is when the WAAAGH goes interstellar. The mech boys, in a frenzy of creation, begin constructing space hulks. These aren't sleek starships. They are asteroids, derelict vessels, and celestial debris, all crudely welded together and strapped with colossal engines and force fields. They are flying monuments to Ork ingenuity and their complete disregard for the laws of physics. Packed to the brim with millions of frothing, battle-hungry Orks, these hulks are flung across the void, often with little to no navigation, relying on sheer luck and the power of the WAAAGH to find their next victim. When a WAAAGH of this magnitude, known as a Great WAAAGH, descends upon a system, it's a cataclysm. It's not a single battlefront. It's 1,000. It's a green wave that crashes against defenses, eroding them through sheer, unyielding attrition. For every Ork that falls, 10 more seem to rise from the blood-soaked ground. They have no concept of retreat, no understanding of fear. To die in a good fight is the greatest honor an orc can achieve. The larger the WAAAGH, the more powerful its psychic effect. Warbosses become near-mythical figures. Legends like Ghazghkull Thraka have led WAAAGH that have threatened the imperium of man to its very core. Ghazghkull is so powerful, so utterly saturated with WAAAGH energy, that he is considered a prophet of Gork and Mork. His every battle a sermon preached with bolt and blade. His WAAAGH didn't just conquer worlds, it changed the strategic map of the galaxy. This is the horrifying truth of the Orks. For any other race, victory means the end of the war, a chance to rebuild, to rest. But for the Orks, victory is just a refueling stop. When T-Wine they absorb the resources, technology, and sheer biomass of their enemies. They grow stronger, more than numeros, and their ambition swells. A victorious WAAAGH doesn't fizzle out. It explodes, sending out fresh waves of invasion, each one stronger than the last. They are the ultimate embodiment of escalation, so remember this chilling thought. For the Orks, there is no peace, no victory, no defeat. There is only the WAAAGH, and when they win the war, it is never the end. It is the beginning of something far worse. Roaring orcs and sounds of planetary destruction swell. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Green Tide, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We've got a lot more lore to explore. Next, we look at the forgotten heroes of the skies, the flyboys of the Imperium. Until then, stay safe and keep delving into the darkness of the 41st millennium.